The Atlanta Falcons can't be too eager to pivot off Michael Penix in 2026 and instead should be focused on quarterbacks in 2027.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Locked On Falcons, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the number one sports podcast network in all of the galaxy. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Use your profit boost on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. If you do not know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman, aka the Iron that sharpens the iron. Been covering the Atlanta Falcons for 2 decades, formerly at FalFans.com, RIP, still going strong here on Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. And on today's episode, we'll talk a little bit more about should the Falcons be focused on finding their answer at quarterback in 2026 or just waiting until 2027. And a lot of that stems from what we talked about on the most recent episode of Locked On Falcons. Maybe that's yesterday, maybe that's today, whenever you listen to the podcast. But we did a mock draft Monday looking at a 7-round mock from Josh Kendall of The Athletic, where he had the Falcons taking Penn State quarterback Drew Aller in round 7. Now, without getting into that, if you want to get my thoughts on that specific projection and selection, go listen to that recent mock draft Monday. But, you know, I said in that episode that taking a quarterback late does make some sense, but don't do it for the sake of doing it. Don't just take a quarterback just to take a quarterback, right? Do it if the right player makes sense. And that gets to a point that you'll hear me say a lot between now and the draft. Like, the draft is about drafting players and not just positions. And I think far too many people think about the draft as, well, you're just drafting positions, right? And, you know, to me in 2026, while I'm not against drafting a quarterback, it's got to be a guy that, as I said in that episode, has starters upside and or you think is going to be a high-level number 2 quarterback, right? Which basically means that guy can start and win games for you, coming off the bench and whatnot, but probably is not going to be one of the 32 best quarterbacks, or really, I guess, the 22 best quarterbacks in the NFL, because typically if you're not in the top 2/3 of the 32 starters, you're probably not very good. You're not going to hold on to your job very long. But Drew Aller checked those boxes for me. I don't know how many other quarterbacks are going to check those boxes, right? And I just feel like in general, when it comes to the Falcons quarterback position, waiting until 2027 makes the most sense. Right? We'll talk a little bit more about why and how 2026 is going to be an evaluation year, on today's episode, as well as throughout this offseason. But, I did some research and looking at the average outcome of quarterbacks drafted after round 4, so 5th, 6th, and 7th round picks, and looked at a decade from 2013 to 2022, that decade. And the reason why I chose that decade is because all of those guys have completed at least 4 years, and thus their rookie contracts in the NFL. And I looked at how many guys, quarterbacks specifically, taken in rounds 5 through 7, how many games they started across their rookie contract. So across their first 4 years in the NFL. And so there were 43 quarterbacks taken after round 4 across that decade. And on average, they started about 4 games across their rookie contracts, which is the same number of starts that Easton Stick, who was a 5th round pick for the Chargers back in whatever year that was, 2018, 2017, 2016, somewhere around there, has started across his NFL career, or at least his first 4 NFL seasons. And only 4 out of those 43 guys, so less than 10%, started 17 or more games across their rookie contracts. That was Brock Purdy, Gardner Minshew, Trevor Siemian, and Sam Howell, right? And the median number of starts was 1 start, right? The average was 4. The median number was 1. And so you had a lot of guys that did not start 1 game, right? And in fact, 30% of those 43 quarterbacks, so 13 of them, did not even play a single snap in the NFL. And I wanted to look it up to see, like, okay, is that just the norm of any late round pick? So I looked at all the 7th round picks taken from 2013 to 2022, and only 21% of those guys played 0 snaps across their first 4 years in the NFL. So quarterbacks have a whiff rate, if we want to say that. if we want to call it a whiff rate of you get nothing from this guy. He doesn't even take the field at any point in his first 4 years. Quarterbacks have a whiff rate of 1.5 times higher taken in rounds 5, 6, and 7, quarterbacks taken in those rounds, than just a 7th round pick at any position, right? So that goes to show you that you're really betting on a low percentage bet when you take a quarterback late in the draft, right? And so to me, the circumstances where it makes the most sense for you to draft one of those guys is like if an early to mid-round guy fell, right? And so when we look at some guys in recent memory that kind of check those boxes of guys that people generally thought were going to be, early round picks, Shedeur Sanders went to the 5th round, expected to be a 1st round pick, went to the 5th. Joe Milton was another guy that was a 6th round pick. Spencer Rattler was a 5th round pick. Both of those guys were relatively highly rated. And so slid in that draft. Will Howard from last year, Quinn Ewers from last year might qualify, since both of those guys were kind of projected to be 4th round picks based off of the consensus rankings, and wound up going Howard in round 6 and Ewers in round 7. So those are the types of guys that I think make sense for, in terms of where I feel like it's worth it to take a late round flyer on a quarterback, where it's like, oh, we're getting a relative steal based off of where people evaluated this guy. And so I know when you guys are doing your mock drafts, you're going to be very tempted to include a late round flyer on a quarterback in those mock drafts. But basically, unless you're willing to pound the table for that guy, similar to and compare him to a Spencer Rattler or Shedeur Sanders or whatnot, it's probably not worth it, right? That I think you're probably better served drafting pretty much any other position that is at least a single, because at least you're going to get, there's a higher probability that you get something in return from even a backup safety or something like that than you are from a late round quarterback, just based off of that whiff potential that we have, right? The odds are much higher the quarterback is going to be that whiff or that strikeout than it is aiming for a single in round 7. So that would be my recommendation for your mock drafts. But that gets us to a larger topic of, should the Falcons be taking dart throws at the quarterback position this offseason, or should they be waiting until next offseason? And we'll break that down as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. So finding a doctor that you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. You got to find someone that's in network, that's nearby, available. You want someone that listens, who makes you feel comfortable, explains things clearly, and is going to help you walk away with that confident feeling for your next step. But your diamond in the rough doctor does exist, and finding them is easy with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high quality in-network doctors so you can choose someone you truly connect with, whether you're looking for that in-person connection or you just want to do video visits. ZocDoc has that available, and their real-time availability means that you can book instantly and not have to play phone tag with doctors' offices. So stop putting off your doctor's appointments. Go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL to find and instantly book that doctor that you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNFL. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring today's message. And if you've ever wanted to experience the NBA Finals live and in person, you can now do so, because FanDuel is going to give you that chance to turn that dream into a reality with their NBA sweepstakes. Here's how it works. Use your profit boost on any NBA future, and you'll automatically be entered for a shot to win an NBA Finals trip for 2. That's right, flight tickets, the whole experience. If you're already looking at the board and thinking about, which team you feel like can make a deep run, this is the perfect time to lock that bet in. You got to love futures at this time of the year, coming off the All-Star break, picking that team that you feel like has a chance to win a championship or grab a conference title. It's going to add an extra layer of excitement for every game down the stretch and make that finals run even more better for you guys. It's not just winning cash, as you often do with these bets, but it also could send you to see that team in the finals. So visit FanDuel.com to get started and use your profit boost today on an NBA future and get entered for a chance to win a trip to the NBA Finals. Play your game with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And guys, wouldn't it be nice to have your taxes done just as easy as it is to hand the ball off to Bijan Robinson and let him cook? Now, with TurboTax Full Service, you can hand off your taxes to a local expert and not have to stress from start to finish. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out your forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They're going to handle everything from W-2s to self-employment forms. They're going to work to get you every deduction. All you got to do is upload your documents, go about your day, throw on some Bijan highlights if you want, and then you can get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver, and it's going to give you a real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it, just like you get peace of mind every time Bijan gets to play football. For a limited time only, get your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life by visiting turbotax.com/local to book your appointment today. So when it comes to the conversation about the Falcons adding quarterback help, like we've talked about the different buckets, and like we know that the Falcons are going to go out there and probably add a veteran quarterback this offseason. Beyond that, I don't know how much work the Falcons, how much focus the quarterback position should have, right? That I think, using this example from the draft and these mock drafts of taking a dart throw just to take a dart throw at the quarterback position, to me doesn't make a ton of sense, right? As I discussed, 2026, the goal of 2026 to me is really an evaluation year. If the Falcons make the playoffs, great. That'll be a great opportunity. And I'm not saying that the goal shouldn't be trying to win games. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying, like, you can walk away feeling good about 2026, even if the Falcons don't win as many games as people want them to win, if you feel like you did get a good evaluation at Michael Penix at the quarterback position, because that's going to inform your ability to make an informed decision in 2027, which is really where you want to be. And we've discussed that already on the podcast. So we're not going to necessarily go too deeply into that on today's episode. But like 2027 offers you a great opportunity to find your long-term answer at the quarterback position. It's expected to be a much deeper year in terms of the quarterback prospects available. And you want this coaching staff under Kevin Stefanski to get on a timeline where they have a quarterback where it's not like, where they're sitting there, we're going into year 3 and they're like, oh, well, Penix is not the guy. So let's bring in a quarterback and hope that guy hits immediately so that can save us. We've seen so many coaching staffs get fired trying to do that exact same thing, right? I mean, Arthur Smith arguably got fired. I mean, for that reason, Raheem Morris arguably got fired for that reason. So timelines matter, but I don't need to find a pivot option in 2026 in a year where the free agent options are limited, in a year where the quarterback class overall is not particularly good. If I'm going to find a pivot option, I'm waiting till 2027 when it's going to be a deeper class, right? And part of this is due to so many conversations I've had over the last week or two, because you guys know, like, I'm not 100% sold that Penix is the long-term answer for the Falcons at quarterback, but I do think, given the options available to the Falcons, it is in their best answer. It is in their best interest to find that out, if he is the answer or not in 2026, which again is why it's such an important evaluation year. And I've had so many conversations with Falcon fans that are trying to hype up Zach Wilson or Mitchell Trubisky or Will Levis or whatever over the last couple of weeks. And I'm just like, this is how down bad we are, where we're just going to basically just believe that every quarterback can be the next Sam Darnold. And that's going to be the challenge of this particular offseason, that everybody's going to just assume that, hey, since it worked for Sam Darnold and the Seahawks, it'll work for us, right? And this feels like a perfect opportunity to drop the Arrested Development meme.
Well, did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
Sure. So, without getting too deeply into it, you got to ask your question, okay, why did Sam Darnold work? Why is the Sam Darnold this relatively unique example of a reclamation project? Well, some of the reasons why Sam Darnold worked is because of the talent level that he had. He had a bad situation in New York for his first part of his year, but got a lot of reps during that bad situation. And then he went to some good situations, particularly in Minnesota and San Francisco, in the intervening years, and flashed ability, high level ability, all throughout that time before ultimately landing in Seattle this past year. And people got to remember, Seattle was not the first team to try to reclaim Sam Darnold, right? They're, in fact, like the third team, technically, to try to reclaim Sam Darnold. The first team was the Carolina Panthers back in 2021, right? And to me, it's notable that Carolina tried, and then 3 years later, depending on if you want to say it worked in Minnesota versus Seattle, but definitely 4 years later, if not 3, it finally clicked for Sam Darnold. And I think the assumption that everybody's making this offseason is like, oh, we're going to be the Vikings/Seahawks in this equation with whoever you think is that reclamation project, versus you're probably going to be the Panthers with a lot of these guys that people are throwing out there, right? If you try to reclaim this guy, you're going to be the Panthers, and then someone's going to benefit from the work that you put in trying to reclaim the guy, 3-4 years down the road. And so, I feel like that's the part of the conversation. Like, you don't want to put in the work and then have somebody else reap the reward for that. So it's like, just wait, right? You want to be the Seahawks. You want to play it safe. You want to wait the intervening 3 years, right? And see a guy, like in the case of Sam Darnold, trending upward across those 3 years, starting in Carolina to, San Francisco to Minnesota. And then you're like, okay, we caught him at the right time. And Seattle was able to successfully do that, rather than being the team that's like, oh yeah, we're going to take Zach Wilson, and I use Zach Wilson as a punching bag on this podcast. It's probably going to be, we're going to take Zach Wilson, who's done nothing for 2 years, other than just, hold clipboards and look okay in preseason against third stringers. And we're going to benefit from that. It's like, no, you're not going to. So, you gotta ask the question of, if this guy is the next Sam Darnold, are you the Panthers or are you the Seahawks? That's the question you have to ask. And more than likely you're going to be the Panthers. So, that's what we'll see if the Falcons, but we'll continue having an ongoing conversation about the Falcons quarterback options in the coming days and weeks. But probably our next episode is going to be all about tagging Kyle Pitts, because the franchise tag window begins on Tuesday, I believe. And so we'll get into, all the reasons for why the Falcons should or should not tag Kyle Pitts on our next episode. And so continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, so that you don't miss that. Check out Locked On NFL for all your NFL news, and go check out the Everydayer Club at the link in the description below. $5 a month or $50 a year. Get lots of perks, including an ad-free version of Locked On Falcons. It is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.